Okay, you are on.
Should I start?
You can start.
Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Deir, and I'm here on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time on my Facebook page, my Facebook timeline, and on my YouTube channel, reading from my award-winning, best-selling flagship book, Guided. I'm reading from chapter 9 today, and I'll get started. Last Saturday, I read from chapter 8 of my true life story, Guided. Her spirit guide angels were her best friends and life coaches. I read about the day I got out alive. The first thing I experienced is that I could breathe, really breathe. Once I started breathing, I couldn't stop. It was similar to someone who has panic attacks. Until this unexpectedly happened, I didn't even realize I had been holding my breath. I had been holding my breath my whole life. Today in chapter 9, I'll be reading about success comes fast and furious. Even though things were working out well, my guides had a surprise in store for me. Out of the blue, I had an amazing realization that things were going to be headed in a new direction. I refer to age 19 as the best year of my life specifically because of this crystal clear clarity my guides sent me. It was instant insight, and I knew I had to find my own way without Alex, my husband at the time. They made it clear that we had no long-term future together, but I didn't see why at that time. So sit back and relax as I tell the story about how, despite family function, my spirit guides took me on one journey after another that led me to a greater understanding of myself. All right, chapter 9. Okay, first of all, this is guided. It's about 400 pages long. I uh, published the book on Amazon in audiobook, paperback, and Kindle format. All right, and I read the book myself. Chapter 9, Success Comes Fast and Furious. In 1970, I started to rack up dental bills. It was a little over a year after Cindy had been born, and I was beginning to have severe toothaches. Not just one or two, but almost all my teeth were hurting. I was out of my mind with pain. Alex had just become an apprentice carpenter, so we had dental insurance. And we had been saving money because he was paid pretty well. The insurance couldn't have come at a better time. When I went to see the dentist, he told me that this was caused by serious malnutrition while I was pregnant. He told me that when I didn't get the nutrition and supplements I needed during pregnancy, the baby took what it needed and depleted me. This was the result. I remember my mother, who was now back in contact with us, laughing at my suffering. She thought I was paying the price I deserved for not having lived my life the way she wanted me to. There was no end to her judgment and pleasure in seeing me suffer. The dentist told Alex and me that it was going to cost thousands of dollars, even with the benefits. But I wouldn't lose my teeth if I started getting the work done right away. The dental insurance covered 80%. The dentist said we could pay him payments for the rest of it. It took about 6 months to complete. My mother told Alex that she knew I needed dental work when we got married and considered that she dodged a medical bill by pushing me off to him onto him, which was not what happened at all. Mom loved digging in her knife as some lingering revenge from the car incident she had with Alex. But I got through that hit to my health, and we quickly got back on our feet financially. With the dental bills retired, we decided it was time for some real furniture. We went to a store that had great values and bought 3 rooms of furniture, along with a stereo and a TV. While we were at the furniture store, I started talking with the owner's wife. She told me about the time she had a breakdown. I was fascinated with that as I asked her what it was like to actually have a breakdown. She told me she didn't know she had had a breakdown until she was well again. So I asked her if there were any signs that she was heading in that direction, and she said there weren't. She said she didn't remember anything that indicated it was happening. She didn't look like a person who had a breakdown. It wasn't like she went nuts or was unstable in any way. She said she just shut down one day and turned off to everything around her for a while. After her candid description of her breakdown, I realized that having a breakdown didn't mean the person went crazy. However, she said the doctors put her on drugs of some kind. I couldn't understand why she didn't remember what led up to the breakdown. Then I started wondering why I was so interested in that in the first place. I had a strong sense that what I learned from that lady would be important for me to know someday in the future. My guides were showing me this, but why? Tip: nothing ever happens by accident. This is an example of how your guides will show you things that are important even though they may not play out for years to come. Your job is to pay attention and even write things like this down if you're concerned about remembering them later. When we had everything picked out, the store manager asked us where we got the money to buy all that furniture. Alex and I thought he was kidding, but he wasn't. Alex looked him in the eye and said, "I worked for it." Alex was very proud, and he loved putting our life together. Alex would tell me he wasn't interested in vacations when we could use our money to have all these great things. We were renting an apartment, and this new furniture was a great fit. However, that was not enough for Alex. He had his eye on getting us into our first home, even though I didn't know about that at the time. Alex was only 19 years old, but he was already making good money as an apprentice carpenter. He was working on a crew framing new starter homes on half-acre lots in a really good area. Alex asked the developer if we could frame one of the houses in exchange for the down payment on it. The developer agreed, calling it sweat equity, and said that we would also be required to paint it as well as frame it. Alex came home and told me about it. As soon as we could, we went to the model of our intended 1,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. It was beautiful. We were so excited that we invited Mom and Dad out to the model. Mom immediately disapproved. What else is new, right? Alex and I couldn't believe what she was saying. We had a perfect strategy to make it happen. We could afford it, and it was a perfect fit for our little family. She said we couldn't afford it, and we were going to overextend ourselves. Dad, on the other hand, liked it, and he also liked our strategy. Needless to say, we ignored Mom's poor advice once again. Alex's fellow framing comrades all agreed to come out on weekends to help. I painted it, and Alex helped me when he had extra time. While under construction, I decided to have a contractor come out and give us a bid on the cost of adding a built-in swimming pool. The house was $19,000, and the huge built-in swimming pool with decking, a 3-meter diving board, a 12-foot deep end, and all the equipment, including a heater, was only $3,600 more. We had the pool built right after we moved in. We invited the families of the men who had helped us frame it over for barbecues and swim parties every weekend. It was so much fun. Larry, my little brother, Larry, was now 17 years old, and he could finally move in with us. Alex got him hired on with the same general contractor that employed him. I was 19 years old, Cindy was 2, and Alex was 20. Though we loved our new home and new neighborhood, we were not welcomed by the new neighbors. We were not their social equals, and the neighbors decided we were trouble the moment we moved in. They all seemed scared of us. We were baffled as to why they were afraid. Our priority when we moved in was to put in our swimming pool instead of putting in front yard landscaping like all the other neighbors had done. No doubt, we were a bit immature, but threatening us like we were troublemakers only made things worse for them because it set Alex off. In his judgment, we had worked hard to get to that point. So he was offended by their assumptions about us. He responded to the neighbor's judgment by refusing to put in the front yard landscaping. In addition to having the Plymouth Roadrunner muscle car, not a family car like the neighbors had, Alex bought a brand new motorcycle. Larry, who didn't like the neighbors either, was living with us and had a dune buggy. And Alex had his work truck. Our house was not the neighborhood showplace. Only after the neighborhood reaction against us became obvious did we notice that we didn't have anything in common with any of them. Being friends with them wasn't important because we had our own friends. Of course, these carpenters were a wild bunch. They were funny and were always looking for an outlet to let off the pressure from a hard week's work. They made a lot of money and spent it just as fast as they made it. We were the youngest of them too, but they liked and admired us. Every weekend, the street was full of our friends' cars. We played music, and the pool was filled with kids and parents having fun. There was a lot of laughter, and the neighbors would call the police, but every time they came out, they saw that we were doing nothing illegal and would just leave. While it possibly wasn't the most mature response, our guests, our carpenters, would climb on the roof and collectively moon the neighbors. This even makes me laugh now, you guys. This was the greatest. All right. Despite the disapproval, we saw our life moving forward and we were happy with it. Learning. This is what happens when people live fearful, paranoid lives. They draw what they fear to them. We were too young to understand that at the time. We were just having fun and unwittingly being agents of delivering to them what they were creating by their judgments of us. Even though things were working out well, my guides had a surprise in store for me. Out of the blue, I had an amazing realization that things were going to be headed in a new direction. I refer to age 19 as the best year of my life, specifically because of this crystal clear clarity my guides sent me. It was instant insight, and I knew I had to find my own way without Alex. They made it clear that we had no long-term future together, but I didn't see why at the time. My guides now directed me to focus on my future, and it was my time to go into action. So from then on out, there was no doubt in my mind that I had to make my own way. Alex had reached his peak, but I had a ways to go. I never said anything to Alex, excuse me, or anyone else. He hadn't done anything wrong, but I was being guided in a whole new direction. I knew what it felt like to actively live in two worlds at the same time. I had mastered that early on and never hesitated to take action, knowing their guidance always had a shelf life. That meant I had to start now, or this particular opportunity would dissipate. But since this was an inner direction, once again, I kept it to myself. Alex had become a journeyman carpenter, and I told him I wanted to start working in the home building business too. He took me to meet the architect who did most of the plans for the contractors Alex's bosses worked for. He was very nice to me, but he said he was too busy to train someone new. He didn't know what I could do, and neither did I. Although it was good for me to meet him, it was premature. Even so, I was clear that I wanted to learn what it would take to get me into the building business as a profession. Learning. Even with the lifelong training I received from my guides, this news was sad for me. However, I knew I was at a major crossroads in my life, and once again, I was being guided. Your guides don't think about how you may react to the timely truth they convey. Their only concern is you and your well-being. That's their job. Interestingly, I got the opportunity to gain some experience when we built our second home. In 1972, Alex told me that the same developer who we bought our first home from had another subdivision going 2 miles away from where we lived. These homes were bigger and more customized, and they were just finishing the model homes. We went to see them and bought a home based on the same sweat equity arrangement we made with that developer the first time. We built this new home to live in and keep the first home as an investment and rented it. We wanted to keep it because it was appreciating so quickly. This time I handled things much more efficiently. Once we finished it, I added a swimming pool, an outdoor cabana, landscaping in the front and backyards. It turned out beautifully, but I was even more restless than ever. Learning. This is what it feels like when you're being guided. You feel like a horse at the racetrack, and once they open the gate, you're off and running. At about the same time we got our second home, Alex got his general contractor's license and started his own framing company. Together, we got it rolling. I drew the contracts between the general contractors and our framing company. I took care of the accounting, the payroll, collecting the check each week from the general contractors, and paying all the bills. I also was handling the legal aspects of the employees, union obligations, insurance, and keeping a close eye on the business profits and losses. Alex ran the crews and controlled the quality of the workers delivered. I also performed the framing pre-inspection walkthroughs, and once the pickup work was done, I would call for the frame inspections from the city or county inspection departments, FHA and VA. I would meet the building inspectors to walk through the buildings with them and write up the corrections that needed to be made to bring them up to code. I was learning a lot and learning so quickly. It got so I would call in a half a dozen buildings at a time for frame inspections, and the inspector would check one. If it had no corrections, he would pass them all because he knew how thorough and consistent I was. I found it easy to work with all these people. It all came naturally for me. Working in a man's world was easy. Until this point, it had felt like someone had been sitting on top of me. Until now, I had felt totally repressed from my true potential. It's not that I knew how to do all these things that became my jobs. I just felt like I could do anything because I was being guided. With their support, nothing was out of reach for me. This is what made it so easy. They knew I would love both the work and the challenge. We started our new framing business in the middle of a terrible recession. It was 1972, during the Middle East oil crisis, when cars were lined up around the block at gas stations. The economy was contracting, but we were naive and bold. We weren't afraid of anything. Our timing turned out to be golden because not only did we thrive in hard times, but the second year in business, we got a $30,000 tax credit for hiring so many people in a recession. I told Alex to take that money and go buy that brand new silver blue Corvette he always dreamed about right off the showroom floor. That's exactly what he did. Tip: even when you have no experience and everything appears bizarre to those around you, don't allow that to distract you. Move through it like you own the place, because nothing can hurt you when you have the constant coaching and guidance from your guides. That same year, in the summer of 1972, we were framing a subdivision of duplexes when distant visitors came from some other place appeared in the sky. It was just before daybreak, and the carpenters were unloading everything out of our trucks. Once Alex's truck was unloaded, I got a telepathic message that said, "Lie down in the back of your truck so you don't blink your eyes when we leave." At that point, they hadn't even arrived yet. But I knew enough to lie down like they told me. Almost immediately, a UFO showed up and hovered right over me. Their ship was round and silver with multicolored lights spinning clockwise around the perimeter. Inside the perimeter, a separate set of multicolored lights was spinning counterclockwise. They started speaking to me telepathically, so I spoke back to them in the same way. I asked them to take me out of here. Even though things were going well, I knew there were better places that I could be. They told me about certain things I needed to do and that I couldn't leave because I wasn't finished here yet. They told me not to tell anyone around about this encounter until 1986. As soon as the sun broke over the crest of the distant mountain range, the ship took off so fast that I would have missed it had I blinked my eyes. They wanted me to see them leave, which is why they asked me to lay down in the back of the truck in the first place. I got up, and all the carpenters, including Alex, were still looking up, frozen in position. I asked them what they saw, and all of them had seen what I had seen. This confirmed that I wasn't the only one who saw it. Then, like getting a bucket of cold water thrown in their faces, Alex ordered them all back to work. The next day, same place, same time, same carpenters. I asked them if they remembered what they saw in the sky the day before. They all looked at me like they should be able to remember something, but they couldn't. Not even Alex. Not one of them remembered anything about what happened the day before. Not even Alex. Once again, it was between me and them. Over time, I found that when things like this happen, I never forget, but everyone else either seems to, or never sees it in the first place. Based on the guy's reactions, I didn't bring it up again, but I did wonder what 1986 would have in store. Tip: as you progress in your relationship with your guides, more helpers will show up. If there was any danger, your guides would step in by warning you or even creating an intervention. Alex and I had a great thing going. We started getting big framing contracts for single family and multifamily projects. This was good and bad. The contracts stated that we had to receive payouts from the general contractors every Friday to meet payroll, union obligations, and monthly state and federal payments, along with paying suppliers. As all of this came to about $30,000 a week. In the 1970s, that was a large amount of money. Everything was fine as long as the general contractors lived up to their agreement with us. But occasionally, the general contractor didn't get his construction draw and would attempt to skip a week. One Friday, I went to collect our payout check, and the general contractor would not even talk to me. His secretary told me that he would not have a check that week, and that was the end of it. That was a first, and I hadn't anticipated it. However, I found that the survival skills I had been forced to learn as a child clicked into gear. I could see the general contractor was on his phone in his office because the light was lit up on the secretary's phone. So to gather my thoughts, I sat down and watched for the light to go out. As I pondered the situation, a solution came through from my guides. It was brilliant and would handle any excuse the general contractor had. As soon as the light on the phone button went out, I walked over to his door. The secretary tried to stop me, but I just walked in. The general contractor frowned when I entered his office, and he told me he didn't have the check. He angrily told me to get out. I replied calmly, saying I understood, but I wasn't sure if the 30 carpenters would understand. So I'll send them over to your house tonight so you can explain it to them. The guy's face went pale and he hemmed and hawed. And then he wrote the check. And we met payroll without any disruption. Paying our people on time was the magic sauce to our success. I was 20 years old, and with the support of my guides, we were getting good at all this stuff. Next Saturday, June 20th, at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I will be reading to you from chapter 10 of Guided. My new career surprises everyone. Following my guidance to find my own way led me to become an architectural home designer, home builder, land developer, and managing our framing business by my early 20s. I didn't plan it, it showed itself, and I moved that way. I had no formal education for any of this, and I didn't know what to expect. This was the same way I always did things from childhood. Listen for the guidance, keep it to myself, and move that way without hesitation. As unconventional as this sounds, it has never been unconventional to me. So until then, remember, you have help. You are always being guided. You are never alone.